Hello, my other self on the other side of the screen. I'm so glad you're here so I can share with you this mini class that I have prepared on the direct path. My name is Gabriel, and I'm going to guide you for the next 30 minutes or so into this presentation on the methodology that I use to help seekers who have refined their search into the path of self-realization, the mystical path of unity. So we're going to go deep into the principles of the direct path, and let's go directly into the presentation that I have. What I want to give you, of course, is an overview of this understanding that you need to really move into experiencing and integrating that which has been calling you so strongly since you had your awakening call. And that is basically what you are seeking. So again, we're going to then, after doing this, we're going to move into how my process is, the way I use this methodology, and we're going to go step by step on these points. But before we begin, a little bit of a background story on me. I grew up as an atheist and scientist until the age of 36. That means that I basically grew up in the classic Spanish family with a very loose Catholic background in religion. It wasn't so much of an emphasis for us. It was just like the background religion. And even though I was sort of devoted when I was a kid, I lost all interest and I became the typical stereotype of, I guess, this era, my generation, of being an atheist and strongly oriented towards science. This changed about the age of 36 or so in 2019, when I had this sudden shift in consciousness that in essence pushed me to question my beliefs and to seek into the nature of reality. This allowed me to use my background as a scientist and a materialist. I was a materialist scientist, and really dive into what I thought was the answer, which was metaphysical in nature, just trying to understand the metaphysics. And I really got into metaphysical and spiritual concepts, all these philosophies, to really understand what consciousness was. The reason was that as a scientist, I realized that we didn't have a satisfactory answer to awareness or consciousness. And that led me down this path. After just a couple of years of going deeper into this understanding, that's when I had my direct insight into the self. And this happened in 2021, which led me to find the direct path and begin this journey that I now share with many seekers who have found the direct path as their calling. And the reason why you are also resonating with this, and I hope to make that very, very obvious. So, about you. I believe that if you're here, you probably have a very strong desire to seek and know through your seeking the truth about yourself. And by default, the truth about reality. But you still don't know how to investigate into it. You probably may have also a very deep yearning for finding the source of love within you. This is usually a yearning or a desire to seek love, to seek happiness. And that's so you can share more with others. Now you see, in these 2 points, you may already see that there is an implicit assumption of the 2 paths that actually bring about the seeking. The mind wants truth, the heart wants love. So you may have a combination of these 2, and this is important to recognize because it will allow us to take the path of least resistance so we can arrive at the same understanding. So again, you may have a very strong desire to know the truth. You may also have a very deep yearning through the heart to find the source of love. or you may have a combination of the two. And this really describes the majority of the seekers in one side of the spectrum or the other, but we all have a combination of them to some degree. The other probable thing that you have is that you want to find the peace and happiness that you have been already glimpsing in your path. So you want to find that source. And this is so you can empower the service or mission that you have, that you feel that you have and you want to share with others. You may have a glimpse already of what this is. Perhaps you're already doing your mission. You know clearly what you're doing, but you recognize that there are some things that are holding you back. And even if you still don't know what you want to do or what it is that your purpose, your mission is, this understanding will begin to reveal it, because it's a natural side effect of us getting in touch with who we are. You probably are also open to the possibility to find all of this and more through direct experience. And this is to begin enhancing your capacity of what we call presence, yes, equanimity. You may be very open actually to the possibility of this happening right now as opposed to in the future. And this is characteristic, of course, of the desire that we have for the direct path. Now, this is important because the level of commitment that we have to let go of our beliefs are going to be directly proportional to what we receive from the universe, or what we're able to allow of the universe through us. That's a very important point. You also may have quite a few limiting beliefs or misconceptions around three things that are very important in the spiritual path, which is meditation, the ego, and healing or liberation. And these limiting beliefs are keeping you stuck. Now, this is not uncommon because there are always some residues of the seeking mind, and there's nothing to feel bad about. It's just that we haven't eradicated that which is maintaining those residues and possibly creating some new ones. And we're going to get into that in this presentation. And the last thing is that I'm pretty sure, not probably, but I'm pretty sure that you want to overcome the negative thoughts that are still present in you, and you still see that they're running your life. They're adding to the reactivity of your life. Again, nothing to worry about. This is just part of the conditioning that we want to get rid of. So, how do I know all of this? Because I was there. This is me in 2019 with my wife, and doing my many practices and going through this seeking of philosophy and the different concepts of spirituality and so on. For over a year, I was submerged in practices. I was stuck in this seeking loop. And I thought that I had to study my way through liberation. I already knew that I wanted liberation, that that's what was calling to me. But at that point, I couldn't identify between my ego and my genuine self. That was a very stumbling block for me. It gnawed at me that I could understand intellectually a lot of this, but I couldn't put it into practice, let alone meditation. It was almost like a failure all the time. I had no idea. I had no teacher who could guide me in meditation, and it was a mystery to me. So that's where I was not too long ago. And I have to say that it really accelerates your growth to simply learn just how to meditate effortlessly, which is something that we're going to get in here. Because through this meditation, which is an effortless activity, that sounds like an oxymoron already, but it's true. once you establish this effortless meditation, you can begin to identify between the ego and the self. That discernment is crucial. That discernment is what actually produces what we call healing or liberation. And again, I keep announcing that I'll talk about that. So we're going to get to that. But first, I want you to take a look at this graphic. Okay, because how did we get here is the question. What do we know? And what we know is represented beautifully in this graphic. So what you're looking at here is mostly the major religions. There's a couple are missing here, but these are the major religions. The religions don't really matter. It's just what they represent here. And I want you to see this graph as the outer layers is what we know as the outer teaching, right? The outer teaching is something that is available to everybody, and it's usually diluted. The information is not so explicit and direct to the practice and to the process of self-realization, and yet they come from there. So if you get deeper into the graph, you see that in the inner teaching, which is the mystical traditions or esoteric, there is a deeper layer into every religion that talks about this. So if you take the path of, say, for example, Christianity, and you move into one of their mystical traditions and practices like hesychasm, for example, then you are already into the mystical tradition. Or maybe Judaism, you move into the study of the Kabbalah. You see, all of them have these different, and there are many traditions within the religion that bring you to mystical experiences and mystical seeking. But what's interesting here is that we get into mystical traditions, and then there is still the leap into the realization that happens directly within us. And that's the transcendent unity that is represented in this graph. That doesn't belong to any tradition because there's nothing to teach about this. This is something that needs to happen within ourselves, and it can only be triggered by the proper stimulus and investigation into the nature of ourselves. Something that doesn't belong to any tradition, and yet all traditions allude to that in some way. Okay, so to me, this graph is very powerful. I'm going to tell you why. Again, as you see, there are 3 layers. One is the outer teaching, which is very diluted. It's meant to satisfy the spiritual needs of somebody who is not so interested in self-realization. Then for those who want to live a life much more aligned with the divine, let's say, there are the mystical traditions, which again are inviting us to stimulate that investigation into self-realization or transcendence, to let go of the separate self. Not everybody who is in the mystical traditions is interested in this, or know, or think, or they have questions. But this doesn't tell the full story. It gets better, especially for us. Because all of this is what we call progressive paths. They start from the outside, they go into the inner, and they're supposed to bring you eventually to that transcendence. Okay? So I want you to look at these graphs within their own traditions as progressive paths. But this is the part where it gets better. You ever heard of New Age? Very new term to describe spirituality. All right, so imagine that we're taking in the New Age, I'm not sure if I can call it a tradition, but it is definitely a phenomenon that's happening. New Age is taking from mostly all these esoteric or mystical traditions, the inner teachings from all over the place, and presenting it to people. That's because of the internet. We have access to Kabbalah, to Taoism, to, as I mentioned, Hesychasm as one of them, Sufism. We have access to all of these teachings. We study koans, and then we move into Hindu mythology, and then we study the Tao Te Ching. You see, this is a sort of mishmash of all these traditions. And while it's great that we have all of this, it leaves us very confused. That is something so powerful to realize, that these are progressive paths that are meant to be taken at best individually through a tradition and be completely devoted to for years, right? Because that's basically what they're created for. But in the New Age phenomenon that's happening, we get all of this together, and that's why there's so much confusion. I know this because I have been invested in this phenomenon for years, and in my hundreds of conversations with people, I have seen this effect and the need and desire that everybody has to bring this seeking to an end. So we're going to move now into the 4 pillars of my way to express and teach the direct path. Let's do an overview here. And at this point of the video, I want you to take notes. So pause the video if you have to. Grab a pen and paper if you need to. I highly recommend it. And start taking notes. Okay? What are these 4 steps, and why are they created this way? I'm going to go on an overview. First is that we need to know ourselves. We need to go through an investigation that can pierce through the veil of this agitated mind directly into the self. Once we establish this investigation and we know for sure there is not a hint of a doubt that that's what we are, which I promise you is not a difficult thing. There is the idea that is difficult only because we have misconceptions around what we are. So when we go into a methodology that guarantees that you can go straight through direct experience to the self and pierce through the confused mind, that's what we want to do. Knowledge of self. Without this, we cannot move on into the next steps and really validate the fruits of this realization of what we are. Knowing the self is the most important, fundamental, essential thing to do. The second step is to, now that we know who we are, well, this is what begins the discernment of the false and the truth. True identity, false identity, and we fall into effortless meditation. This is what creates the basis for effortless meditation. Why is this foundational before step 3? Or my third pillar here is because you can only liberate yourself from those false identities, the negative patterns that have been running your life, and enact this healing in you through self-acceptance, which can only happen when you are able to discern who you are in the moment and discard or allow those things that you're not to fall away. When all of this happens, then what we call unfolding your gifts, right? Or empowering your mission, your service, your dharma, your vision. All of this happens as a side effect, is a result, is the fruit of us really empowering the first step actually, which empowers the second and so forth. So let's go into more details about this. Like I said, knowing yourself is the foundation of all spiritual work. If we don't know ourselves, how can we possibly imagine that we're going to improve or allow the evolution of that which we genuinely are, that we have always been since we were children, to develop? If there is a confusion of identity, who is evolving? Is it the true me, or is it the false self? Still confused. And we know this because we still carry many negative thought patterns. They're not evil. They're not here to mess with you. They're here because you have allowed them to define you. And those things are not you. So the first step, obviously, is the foundation for all the work that we're going to do. Okay? We need to identify what is our guiding star. Yes? The self, what we call the self, is equal to what we call I. Right? Or awareness itself. That's what knowing yourself is. We need to also honor the perception that we have that we are a body and a mind. We're not going to bypass anything. We're going through direct experience beyond the mind and body, but we have to honor that, and we start there. But then after this, you begin to see the revelation of what you are. Again, this is something that works on its own. You're not trying to push it. All you're doing is investigating. You're really just acting on the curiosity that has led you to this point and moving through the investigation of what you are. You've heard that, and you see, this is not something new, because what we experience as healing is something that has always happened in our lives, but it's just happened unconsciously. You've heard that time heals everything, right? But not always. Time sometimes conceals our traumas and so on. But like I said, it still works in the background sometimes, and I want you just to imagine that what we unfold here is accelerated by us becoming conscious of the process. So again, as our true self is revealed, purification of the self structure begins. And that's everything that we're looking for. So I have a question for you, and I want you to consider it and write an answer to this. What comes up when you ask yourself, who am I? It's an honest question. There's no right answer here, but write it down. The next step is weakening the ego, which is the result, like I said, of us being able to discern who we truly are. When we are in the presence or embodiment of our true self, that which we are not, that false self, can be discerned. This constant recognition of who we are, which is the same thing. I call it the one practice. Yes? This is what we call meditation. This is why with pillar number 1, or step number 1, when done correctly, when done in true validation of what we're doing, brings about this effortless meditation. And it really is effortless because it requires zero effort to recognize who we are. In fact, it requires efforts to be given up. In other words, all effort that we do must be given up so we can see what we are. So this is something that it's so beautiful as it begins to show in our practice, because as a result of simply being able to discern what we are and that which we are not. And it keeps going on forever. It's this practice never ends. So this is what happens after we realize who we are. The weakening of the ego and the purity of effortless meditation just starts to shine in us. There is no more question about if I had a good meditation or a bad meditation. This goes out the window. So before we move on to the third step, I want you to write down here and ask your question: what's the difference between my ego and myself? Are you able to discern that? Write it down. The third step is, I call it spontaneous healing, because we usually think and learn that I need to heal. I need to do things to heal myself. But once you have gone through the process of knowing who you are, there is a perfection seen there. There's a beauty that is already present. You've always heard that you are perfect the way you are, right? So if you're perfect the way you are, then why do you need healing? Well, it's only because you are convinced by past memories that you are not perfect. So healing is just getting rid of that. But aren't we doing that already in step 2 by weakening the ego? Because the ego is really what's telling me what I'm not. You see how this works? It's beautiful. It's only through our true identity that we can reveal, expose, and liberate the ego. It makes absolute sense. How can we liberate what we are not if we don't know what we truly are? Think about it this way. Only with awareness, and I'm going to use awareness and self interchangeably here. Only with awareness can we reveal unconscious patterns. That makes sense, yes? Only with awareness can we reveal these unconscious patterns that are there. Awareness itself is what exposes the reality and says, that's true, that's not. Just like light shows in the darkness and shows the form of all things. But only through awareness can they dissipate or evolve, which is really a more appropriate word to what happens to our conditioned thoughts. They don't disappear, they evolve, and they become like a muscle in ourselves. They become strong. They not strong in the way they were, but just strong in a way that they serve us. That's why all the dark things that we have gone through are our strength, only if we reveal it with awareness. Again, all of this is going to happen through the process of self-acceptance. You've heard forgiveness and balance. All of this is happening already because of the previous steps. All of these all-conditioned patterns are going to be liberated, and like I said, effortless healing activates in the background of simply being. Now, I want you to ask yourself the following question, and be honest about it. Be truthful. How efficient is your system for healing, and what does it depend on? We all have some sort, especially at this point in our path, a way to deal with emotions. So that's my question to you, and it's something that you can write down. Lastly, I call this mind mastery, because at the end of this cycle, which by the way, these 4 pillars work in unison as one cycle, your mind becomes the servant. You ever heard of that? The mind is a poor master, great servant. That's what we're shifting here. And this is where all your gifts start to shine, because the mind is a very powerful tool. And if it's worked upon appropriately, it's going to yield so many benefits. Now, this is also the end of seeking. Once we begin to see these fruits, we see that we no longer need to seek anywhere else outside, but rather to keep going inside for all these fruits to keep coming out. See, you keep blossoming, you keep developing new petals of this inner lotus that is inside of us. everything that I talked about in terms of your service, all of it, it's going to be revealed here. And this is what you're going to start to cultivate, your true self. And it's going to feel like, well, very much normal. It doesn't feel like anything new. You feel so comfortable in your skin. You see that this is not anything new. It's just the old you that had been repressed for a long time, and it's now just being liberated to do what it wants. It's like a child that has been in a room for however long, and it's finally coming out to play. That's how it feels. But this is the end result of the purification process and what you have always been. I love the word spontaneous, because your spontaneous self, your genuine self, is what's being allowed through. Why? Because it's unhindered by the conditioned self. So, I want you to ask yourself the following question. What does it mean to be at peace to you? What does that mean? So, again, this is the direct path, the way I teach it, the way it came through me, and it transformed my life. I like simplicity. I like things practical. And I love, as a scientist, I appreciate that which is verifiable all the time. I feel uncomfortable when it's about beliefs, when it's about a process that in the future is going to arrive at something. I like direct observation, and I want to see the fruits of that observation. It's a residue of my scientific mind, but I love that I found it in spirituality. And it's not something that I created. It's something that has been here for thousands of years, and many mystics in the past have talked about this. So, what do? We know ourselves. And I tell you, this is the easiest part. We also call this the pathless path. I love that. Traditions like Zen, Advaita Vedanta, and Taoism are well known for encouraging this self-realization in the moment, in the present moment, through what? Through direct experience. Like I said, this is not something new. I didn't create it. I just found it, and I realized that that's what I needed. And if you're here still, this is definitely what you need to. In fact, this is actually easier than easy, because it requires the cessation of effort. To become one with experience is not something that you do. It's something that you allow, or you recognize that you already are that. Remember, effort is only required to resist something. When you relax, you're in the flow. Effort is only required to resist. And that resistance is what creates the separation of ourselves from experience and others. Relax into it, and you will be one with the flow. When you realize who you are, and you are able to recognize what you're not, that's meditation. Effortless meditation. And in that effortless meditation, guess what's happening? Healing. And healing leads to the liberation of that child, of that spontaneous self that you are. Isn't that beautiful? Lastly, the question is, why not take this effortless path? Ask yourself that. What is it that you have that is preventing you from taking this effortless path? The mind has created answers to you. The mind has put a carrot in front of you. I know that. It did it for me. And it's not until you go through the mind, like I said in our first step, we go and pierce the veil of the mind and look directly into the essence of our nature, that we can get rid of that tendency, because it's just a tendency. It's not even an obstacle. It's a tendency that the mind has to distract us. So this was a high-level overview of what I do. This is the specificity of my work and what I love doing. Hopefully at this point you understand better why it is that you're seeking in this direction. You can see that what I do really is to take seekers of self-realization, those who are really interested in self-realization, and I take them down this path through an investigation of their direct experience. It's not something advanced, it's not something complicated. You don't need anything, really. In fact, anything else that you have may just be a distraction at this point, really. It's not required, to be honest. But if you do, because we all did, some sort of investigation into the nature of reality and so on, that's helpful, but it's not needed. And it can become a hindrance, sure, if we're still stuck there looking, as it were, like in the graph that I showed, looking to find liberation through that. But again, I just want to recap so you know what this process is. And in the way that I presented, know yourself. By knowing yourself, you understand the ego activity. And as a result, you're able to meditate, if we can still use that word. Just be one with the experience. When you do that, that is what we call healing. Healing is happening in the background, just by you being one with experience, not resisting. And that healing is a liberation of that which you are. Your dharma, your vision, your purpose, whatever you want to call it, your gift to the world, your opening of the divinity through you so you can give it to the world. And it feels amazing. It feels like you're actually completing what you came here to do. So what I wanted to do at this point is just go over the answers that he got from the questions. And if you want to talk to me, you should find a link down here, depending on the platform that you're using. So you can contact me if you want to go deeper into this with myself, and we can get into your individual current situation, and we'll see what we can do. But I hope this was helpful. I appreciate you being on this path. And again, use the link somewhere here in the platform that you're using. And I hope to hear from you soon.